Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so that you know when live we go. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified. In the next 35 minutes, we are going to run through today's newspaper, The Hindu, Delhi edition, and we shall pick up important articles and discuss them from civil service examination perspective. The articles that we shall take up for discussion has been tabulated in front of you and the time stamping for the same has been given in the description section. Before we begin with the discussion, I'll give you a set of questions which you have to take as a self-test so that you know what you don't know. In front of you there are 14 questions, 12 of them are of true and false kind. Question number 13 is to identify a country and question number 14 has description of a climate which you have to identify. If you take the test sincerely, your curiosity to know more will increase, your focus and concentration while taking the DNS will also be high, and you can draw more benefit using the DNS more effectively. For the benefit of visually impaired candidates, I'll read out the questions. The questions that I'm going to read out are of the nature of true and false. First question, if agriculture grows by 4%, it is likely to contribute only around 0.6% to GVA growth of India. India's food grain production in 2019-20 was 3.7% higher than the preceding year. Increase in food inflation necessarily implies higher and sustained demand for food. Higher food inflation is good for small and marginal farmers in India as they will get higher return on their crops. Total factor productivity is a measure of economic efficiency and accounts for part of the differences in cross-country per capita income. Improvement of governance is considered necessary for total factor productivity. Forest fire is sometimes required for healthy existence of natural vegetation. California is touched by warm ocean current. Position of the Deputy Speaker goes to the opposition as per Article 93 of the Constitution. Speaker submits his resignation to the President. Speaker and Deputy Speaker can be removed by the resolution passed by the House with absolute majority. During the period of loan moratorium, interest on the loan is waived off. Question number 13 is this. Great Leap Forward and Cultural Revolution is heard in news in the context of which country? And question number 14 gives description of a climate type. It is characterized by mild, wet winters and warm to hot, dry summers and occur on the west side of the continent between 30 degree and 40 degree latitude. Which climate type is this? These are the questions. You should take 5 minutes to answer them, not more than that. Then take the same questions again after taking the DNS and see if you are able to answer all of them. And these are the answers to the question of the quiz. This is the lead article from page number 6. It is titled An Agriculture-Led Revival as Flawed Claim. Meaning the claim that agriculture can lead to revival of economy is flawed one, is an incorrect one. The writer of the article is a NABARD chair professor in Tata Institute of Social Sciences. So he gives some insight about the present condition of agriculture sector. The argument put forward by the author is that agricultural sector is already having too much of problem. So to expect that agriculture can become the growth engine for economy in the present slowdown will be too much to ask for. So to imagine that there can be an agriculture-led revival is only a pipe dream. See, we have seen these numbers before in previous DNS. We know that in the first quarter of 2020-21, for the first time in last 41 years, GDP has contracted. The numbers were going down even before the outbreak of COVID-19, but during the time of COVID-19, the economy has been worst affected. And in this scenario, only agriculture sector has locked a positive growth. Every other sector has seen contraction. But just because agriculture has seen positive growth, too much of hope should not be laid on agriculture sector. In the beginning of the article, the author has mentioned the reasons that have become the base for the claim that agriculture will lead India's economic revival. Reason number one, India's food grain production in 2019-20 was 3.7% higher than 2018-19. Also, the procurement of rabi crops, especially wheat, in 2020-21 was 12.6% higher than the preceding year. So higher production and higher procurement is a sign of resilient agriculture sector. The author has given a counter argument which we will be seeing very shortly, but first let's look at it from one particular lens and then we'll look at it from the lens of the author. It is also a fact that food inflation in the first quarter of this economic year is at 9.2%. It is higher than the previous year. Higher food inflation would mean that the trade is in favor of agriculture. Higher food inflation means higher prices of food, which ought to give higher return to the seller, the farmers. It is also a fact that this year, the area under the Kharif sowing has increased. Higher Kharif sowing was accompanied by higher tractor and fertilizer sales. These numbers are readily available. So the argument is that the higher sale of tractor and fertilizers and other agricultural input will result in economic recovery. And last but not the least, agriculture sector is also placed to gain from the Atmanirbhar package that was announced previously by the government. So for these reasons, it may appear that agriculture sector is doing well and it can be utilized for economic revival. But there's a big but, and the author has offered all those buts. The author has said that it is a fact that food grain production has increased and government procurement also has increased. Because of the lockdown, many state governments have made special effort to generate buffer and for that purpose procure more food grains. So procurement has increased of rabi wheat. But it is also a fact that only 13.5% of paddy farmers and 16.2% of wheat farmers sell their harvest to government procuring agencies at minimum support price. So the government procurement is happening from very small percentage of farmers. The rest of the farmers sell their output to private traders at much lower price than MSP. So to say that the rabi procurement has increased by 12.6% means nothing. This data is of government procurement, not the net procurement. And it is a fact that production has increased. But increased production means nothing. Unless the farmers are able to sell it at reasonable price, higher production means nothing. Rather, the higher production becomes the source of farmers' suicide. So what must be checked actually is market arrivals of the crops. And the author claimed that according to his own research work, the market arrivals has decreased this year. He has given many figures, but one that is significant, the most important rabi crop wheat has seen only 61.6% of arrival in 2020 compared to the previous year. So the truth is that farmers have suffered major loss of their income despite higher production. And increased procurement from the government side has not helped much. Further, the MSP is for food crops. There has been major loss in animal husbandry, especially in the poultry sector. Then for the second claim that the food inflation in the first quarter of this economic year has increased. It is at 9.2%. This is true that the food inflation indeed has increased, but the inference being drawn from this is incorrect according to the author. Higher food inflation does not necessarily mean sustained demand for food. See, food inflation increases, that means the price increases. The price definitely depends on demand, but it does not always depend upon demand. In this case, the author suggests that because of disruption in the supply chain and rise in the trader margins, the food price actually has increased and not because of demand. The household consumption actually has gone down, and the author has given lots of number for that, but that is not important for us to remember. Additionally, even if food prices would have increased because of demand, that does not mean that the rural economy is doing well. Because in India, 86% of farmers are small and marginal farmers. And small and marginal farmers are not net sellers, but they are net buyers. So higher food inflation is never a good news for rural economy. So this claim that higher food inflation has actually helped the farmers or the rural economy is misplaced. The third reason that we saw was that Kharif sowing has increased by 14%. And then there has been higher sale of tractor and fertilizers and other inputs. That is okay. But according to the author, these are not indicators of prosperity, but these are indicators of distress. According to the author, as we have discussed just in the previous point, that the income from the Rabi sale fell. So many rural households have returned to farming or intensified the farming activity or have taken up activity of farming in the fallow field. And above that, lakhs of migrant workers have returned to villages from the urban areas. They too have taken agricultural work, maybe in areas in the fallow lands where agricultural activities were not practiced previously. According to the data of Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, number of persons employed as farmers in June and July of 2019 were 11.2 crores and 11.4 crores. But in June and July of 2020, this number has increased to 13 crores and 12.6 crores. So compared to last year, more than 1.5 crore people have registered themselves as farmers. Also, the unemployment rate in the rural region rose rapidly to 22.5% in April, and gradually it has come down to 9.5% in June. Still, numbers compared to previous year is high. So again, if Kharif sowing has increased and if the tractor and fertilizer sales are increasing, that does not mean that agriculture is doing very well. The author has said that although there has been various announcements under Atmanirbhar Bharat package, but the fresh spending on agriculture was very less. It is just around 5,000 crore. And the previous schemes and initiatives for agriculture were bundled up again in the Atmanirbhar Bharat package. See, you know this already that agriculture contributes only about 15% to India's GVA. So even if agriculture grows by 4%, which is aspirational, still its contribution to net GVA growth will be only 0.6. And 0.6 is nothing. So agriculture must not only be seen as support to economic revival, but special attention is required by agriculture itself. So the positives that we see, like for example higher Rabi procurement, higher Kharif sowing, also higher flow of cheap credit to rural region, they will be nullified by the factors like lower crop prices, low market arrivals, higher unemployment in the rural regions. The author also has given certain suggestions as to what can be done for revival of agriculture and rural economy. First of all, he suggests that the PM Kisan should be doubled. Presently, it has 3 installments of rupees 2,000 each, totaling rupees 6,000 a year. Under distressful condition, this could be too less. It can be increased to rupees 12,000 a year. Recently, government has announced increased minimum support price for paddy by rupees 53 per quintal. Similarly, for cotton, around rupees 260 per quintal. But the author is suggesting that the MSP in general must be increased for all crops, and it must be set at 150% of C2 cost, the comprehensive cost of production. This was a formula that was given by the Swaminathan committee. There is an issue going on of moratorium of repayment of farm loans. Meaning for some time it's okay if you don't pay, but ultimately you'll have to pay. And in that duration of moratorium, the account will not be signed off as NPA. But the author is calling for waiving of the interest on the farm loan. Because if that is not done, it might be very difficult for the farmers to actually pay it back. The author is also calling for a special package for animal husbandry sector instead of some vague schemes that presently Government of India is running. And similarly, some direct financial assistance must be given for small milk producers as well. Because the milk price also has gone down. If we don't do this, then the rural economy, which is already in distress, may enter into a vicious cycle Where there will be low demand will result in low production. Low production will lead to low growth. And because of low growth, low income, and again low demand. To break this vicious cycle, we can begin from here by breaking down this low demand. And that is why money must go in hands of people, so it can be seriously considered by government to increase the amount under PM Kisan. There is an article on page number 6, The Great Graying of China, referring to the aging population of China. This article basically talks about the problem China is going to face in short term because of increasingly aging population of China. See, aging of China and the problems of China are the internal matters of China. As such, it does not concern us directly and it is not part of UPSC syllabus as such. But there is one very important concept discussed in the article, total factor productivity. This is a very important concept and we can apply this to India as well because the demographic position at which China is standing, soon we will also be there. Also, to analyze the economic productivity, you can apply the concept of total factor productivity to our economy as well. So, for the sake of understanding total factor productivity, we are taking up this article. Look, you know that China adopted one-child policy in 1979. This was the initiative of the leader of Communist Party of China, Deng Xiaoping. This was done with the intention of increasing per capita income of China after the disastrous failure of the Great Leap Forward and Cultural Revolution that was started by Mao. Deng Xiaoping came after the death of Mao, took the leadership of China and tried his luck with one-child policy in China. Presently, according to the official figure of China, total fertility rate stand at 1.6. This is much less than the replacement rate of 2.1. We are also close to replacement rate, but our total fertility rate presently is 2.2. And because of reduced total fertility rate of China, by 2050 it is estimated that the aged population above 65 years would be around 32%. The working population will reduce from about a billion to around 780 million. And the overall population of China will reduce to 1.07 billion. Now, here is a very crucial question that will be pertinent for India as well. Will China break into the category of rich country or it will age before reaching the level of rich countries? Because you know, as the population starts to age, the expenditure of government on health and welfare of the aged population increases. The burden on working population will also increase, taxation will increase, the saving of the nation as a whole will decline. There would be decline in manufacturing and exports because of fall in the number of young population. So overall revenue of the government and wealth of nation will reduce. And once it starts to reduce, it's very difficult to keep the pace of GDP and become a developed nation. See, once you have become a developed nation, you have sophisticated technology. There is a research environment, you have a good human resource. So that keeps up the pace. Even if you have dependent population, your young population will drive up the economy. But if you start to age before becoming a developed nation, then it's almost impossible that you will become one even at a later stage. This is an immediate important question in front of China. Few years later, this question will come in front of India as well. There are economists who believe that as population size starts to reduce, intellectual exchanges among the population also reduce. And the chance of emergence of great innovators also reduce. The only way of reducing the impact of declining population is to raise total factor productivity growth. And this is what is of our interest in this particular section of our discussion. What is total factor productivity growth? First of all, what is total factor productivity? Total factor productivity is measured as the ratio of aggregate output. That output usually is GDP. The ratio of aggregate output to aggregate input. Input is labor and capital. So this basically is the relative measure of how fast the GDP is growing in relation to the growth of capital and labor, in relation to the growth of input. If this is greater than 1, that means GDP is growing faster than labor and capital, meaning there are other factors as well for GDP growth. So, growth in total factor productivity actually signifies that portion of growth which is not explained by growth in traditionally measured input, that is labor and capital. And growth in total factor productivity is actually the difference in the growth of GDP, the output, and the growth of labor and capital. All in all, you can say that total factor productivity is the measure of economic efficiency. Two nations can have the same amount of labor and same amount of capital, but output of both the nations may be different. The output will depend how efficiently the input is utilized. And that measure is total factor productivity. So total factor productivity is the signal of economic efficiency, and it also partly explains the difference in cross-country per capita income. The nations with higher total factor productivity are bound to have higher per capita income. There are 3 factors that are considered critical for increasing the total factor productivity. First and foremost, market reform, improvement in governance structure of the nation, and development of human resource, skill development in manufacturing and services. But this in general is development of human resource, and education will also be included here. Now we have come to an interesting point. China is aging. The question is, will China break into the category of developed nation? To answer that, you can check the total factor productivity of China presently and in future. And for that, you can consider these 3 parameters. You can see how China is doing on these 3 parameters. If it is doing fine, then it can become a developed nation contingent on other things. But if China is failing on these 3 factors, then it is unlikely that China will become a developed nation. So we'll do this analysis for China, and you do the brainstorming for India as well, how India is performing on these 3 parameters. So this can become a template for you. You can apply these parameters for total factor productivity on any nation. But most importantly, you must do it for India. And you can use this across GS papers. You can use it in Polity and Governance of GS paper 2. You can also use it under Indian Economy section of GS paper 3. Market reforms is considered critically important for increasing total factor productivity. Under President Xi Jinping, China has done economic reform, and it has tried to increase the consumption of the nation, especially in context of decreasing export, but China has not done fundamental market reforms like opening of services such as banking, insurance, education, or establishment of an independent legal system for enforcement of contracts. The next important criteria for high total factor productivity is improvement of governance. And China has never been ranked very high in any governance related index. China's score in government effectiveness or its ranking in the perception of corruption index of Transparency International always has been very poor. Then there is a factor of developing human resource, providing quality education to population, and skill development in manufacturing and in services. See, it's a fact that China has seen some success in this regard in the past. China has successfully migrated its population from agriculture to manufacturing, and China has developed skill in manufacturing. But if we talk about the future recourse of the nation, then it's not on a very bright spot. In China, the high school pass rate is 90% in urban region and only 24% in the rural region. This is alarming because 40% of Chinese population lives in rural region. So if you talk about prospect of China for becoming a developed nation, it is very low. Because in past 70 years, if you see the record of nations who have climbed the ladder from being a middle income country to high income country, they all have done very good in terms of their students completing high school. Nations like Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, which have seen great transformation within decades, they have skilled their workforce and 75% of their population completed high school. Over and above this, China also have other troubles waiting for it. China is definitely going to face a hostile external environment in the coming years because of the aggressive policies of China and especially its handling of COVID-19 pandemic. And in that hostile condition, there will be considerably less cooperation with other developed nations for new emerging technologies. Also, after 2008 financial recession, China's economic growth has been driven predominantly by higher government investment. And China has developed overcapacity for metal, cement, and other industries. Similarly, infrastructure like oil pipelines, ports, they all are running under capacity. There are many apartment complexes which are lying vacant. There are many ghost cities in China, meaning you have buildings and apartments, but there are no takers for it. They all are lying vacant. So the prospect of the nation for becoming a developed nation or a world power seems to be very grim. Also from this article, we must take lesson for ourselves and we must do a little bit of brainstorming to morph the content of this and to apply the learning we have had for total factor productivity in context of India. There is an article on page number 10, have a clear loan policy, Supreme Court saying to the government. Look, people who have borrowed money from the bank before COVID-19 now are finding very difficult to return it back. Because of the lockdown and the economic slowdown, decrease in the economic growth, there is less production, less output, less sale, and hence people are not in the financial position to return back the money. So the farmers and the small traders have been pleading to the government and the RBI and the courts, and the matter finally has come to Supreme Court. See, the thing is, because of the economic distress, RBI came out with a loan moratorium scheme for a period of 6 months, starting from March this year till August 2020. But this scheme was on voluntary basis. Anyone can voluntarily opt in or opt out. You might think, why would anyone voluntarily opt out? People will generally like not to return back the money. But you have to know, any loan moratorium, first of all, is not a loan waiver. You have to give back the principal, you have to give back the interest. Furthermore, the interest would continue to accrue on the outstanding portion of the loan even during the period of moratorium. So it would be in your own interest to give back money as early as possible. So if you have money, then it is profitable for you to opt out of this moratorium scheme. So this is the basic background and understanding of the moratorium scheme that the RBI came up with. But it lapsed in August. And on 31st of August, RBI came up with a detailed guideline for enabling the bank to undertake loan reconstruction. So now the banks can initiate the insolvency process as well. But since the matter has come to Supreme Court has put everything on hold and asked the government and RBI to get into a discussion and come up with a plan. There are two basic questions in front of Supreme Court and Supreme Court has not answered any one of them and is waiting for the response of RBI and the government. One of the matter is the extension of moratorium. The moratorium was for 6 months. Now the plea is to extend it even further. For now, the Supreme Court has said that accounts that were not declared as NPAs shall not be declared as NPA even now until further orders are given. And Supreme Court has given 2 weeks of time to the government to consult with RBI and come up with a plan. The second crucial question is waiver on interest. See, there was a moratorium of 6 months and in all likelihood it will further increase. So if the interest keep on piling up, the borrowers will end up giving interest on interest. And the net sum of money that the borrowers have to give to the banks will increase exorbitantly. That is why many are asking for a waiver on interest. In the previous article also we saw that the author was asking for a waiver on interest on the farm loans. Because if that doesn't go, that would be a vicious cycle. And many will come into the debt trap. Supreme Court prima facie is of the opinion that the interest would be a huge burden on the borrowers. Hence, banks should provide a waiver on the interest. But a judgment has not come on this. We'll have to wait for now. After 2 weeks, the government will return to the court and then we'll see what final stand the Supreme Court will take on this matter. But we know the opinion of RBI already. RBI is of the opinion that the interest waiver is not financially prudent and it is discriminatory as well. First of all, RBI has given numbers that waiver on interest would lead to loss of around 4 lakh crore to the banks, which is roughly around 2% of India's GDP. There is a very valid technical point that RBI has given. RBI has said that banks are required to pay interest to the depositors during the moratorium period. So if banks do not get the interest from the borrower during this period, then the whole banking system would collapse. That's how the banks function. They give interest to the depositor and they take interest from the borrower. So if you're asking for a waiver of interest for borrower, then logically interest must also not be given to the depositors. But if banks are forced to give interest to the depositors and not take interest from the borrower, then banking system will collapse. And of course it is discriminatory because in the beginning we saw this moratorium scheme was voluntary. So people who have not opted for this and have paid the interest, they ultimately will end up paying more and will be discriminated against. So to sort out the issue, the central government has recently appointed an expert committee under the leadership of former CAG Rajiv Maharishi. The committee will give its recommendation, Government of India will consult RBI, make up its mind, go back to the court and we'll see what finally Supreme Court will decide. There is a news on page number 14, California wildfires growing bigger. The fire has been growing by leaps and bounds. Thousands of people have been stranded in the fire and helicopters have to dash into the smoke and rescue these people stranded in the forest fire. It has been noted that the forest fire is spreading very fast. The forest officials have declared it to be spreading at the speed of 24 km per day. This is unprecedented speed of forest fire. We'll come to the reason as to why this is happening, but first let's see California on the map. It is the western state of the United States and it is well adapted to forest fire. If you see the mapping of forest fire, too many forest fires have occurred in the recent time. If you think of climate of California or this region of the world, mostly the climate is Mediterranean, having dry summer and wet winter. And if the summer is dry, obviously you would understand the region will be prone to forest fire. There is also a California current in this region, and this California ocean current is a cold current. Cold current does not bring enough moisture. So there is a problem of rainfall as well, which makes the climate dry and which makes the climate mostly Mediterranean. Now the question is why California is burning so much? Why the intensity of forest fire has increased? Look, it is beyond doubt that climate change has a great role to play in increasing the intensity of the forest fire. Because of climate change, the climatic condition is more dry. There are less snowpack in the mountain top. There are lesser runoff in the spring. There is less moisture in the soil. There is less moisture in the vegetation. And all these have contributed to the increased frequency of forest fire. And because of the drier condition, the speed of the forest fire is also very high because the fire now can catch up in the adjoining region very fast. Because of the coastal location of California, the wind also has a great role to play. In the recent time, fire tornadoes have been observed. The flames of the forest fire, they are trapped in the fast moving circulating wind. The winds not only take up the spark of the forest fire and carry it to distance, further increasing the forest fire, but the wind also disrupts the flying of helicopters. So the water dropping activities and activities related to putting out the forest fire also gets affected. Because of the increased speed of forest fire and because of the role of wind, the warning is not effectively given because the forest fire catch up very soon and rescue operation also becomes very difficult. But however, in many instances, man-made factors are also responsible for forest fire. For example, some of the recent forest fires in California were a result of parties happening in the forest. Sometimes because of the spark, because of not well-maintained infrastructure of electricity supply, sometimes people very casually discard the cigarette butts, sometimes the fireworks. There are plenty of reasons for human-caused forest fire in this region. But as we have mentioned in the beginning, California has a climate that encourages forest fire. The summer is dry, so naturally the vegetation in this region is also adapted to forest fire. Then what's the big deal? See, forest fire is part of the natural cycle of vegetation of a place. If that place very frequently sees forest fire most of the time happens naturally because of lightning. And some native plant and trees even require forest fire to sprout new growth so that the seed comes out and a new plant can germinate. But however, the cycle of forest fire is not so frequent in any vegetation that is adapted to forest fire. Generally, it is 30 to 100 years. For example, the pine tree. It requires a forest fire to happen only once in 100 years. No vegetation can sustain if large-scale forest fire happens every now and then. It's definitely a wake-up call by nature, and we must respond to it and acknowledge the accelerated climate change happening on Earth. There is an article on page number 10, House can select Deputy Speaker. See, the thing is, for the first time in the history of Lok Sabha of India, the post of Deputy Speaker is lying vacant for over an year. The opposition party has been pleading to the Speaker to appoint a Deputy Speaker. The Speaker in a press conference has said that it is for the House to select the Deputy Speaker and not the Speaker himself. Here I'll tell you one thing, that by convention, the position of Deputy Speaker goes to opposition. And this convention was set by the Janata Party government, the first non-Congress government at the center. And ever since, the position of Deputy Speaker goes to opposition. But this is not by law. There is no such provision in the Constitution. This is simply a convention. And the position of Deputy Speaker going to the opposition is the prime reason why it is vacant for so long. There's also a problem of consensus among the opposition parties as to who should hold this position. For the prelims exam, we will quickly brush up some of the constitutional article related to Deputy Speaker. Article 93 talks about Speaker and Deputy Speaker together. It says that the House of People shall, as soon as may be, choose 2 members of the House to be respectively Speaker and Deputy Speaker thereof. And if the office of a Speaker or Deputy Speaker fall vacant, then the House shall choose another member. This is what the Speaker was referring to in the press conference, that this is the job of the House. But obviously, to initiate the selection process, there has to be voting, and for that purpose, it has to be brought up in the business of the House that has to be approved by the Speaker. But initiative has to be taken by some members of the House. You should know that when Deputy Speaker resigns, he submits his resignation to the Speaker, and when the Speaker resigns, he submits resignation to the Deputy Speaker. The Speaker and the Deputy Speaker, they are removed by resolution of the House. This resolution must have the effective majority. Effective majority means majority of the total strength of the House, barring the vacant seats. So you don't do 50% of the total number of seats, but 50% of the members of the House. If few seats are vacant, you will not consider that. If the office of the Speaker fall vacant, then obviously the Deputy Speaker will take up the position. But if the office of the Deputy Speaker is also vacant, then any such member of the House as appointed by the President will take up the position of Speaker. And as per Article 96, when there is a question of removal of Speaker or Deputy Speaker, then they shall not be presiding the House. Ordinarily, Speaker will preside the House. But if a Speaker is not there, then Deputy Speaker preside the House. But if there is a question of removal of Deputy Speaker and Speaker is not there, then in that case, Deputy Speaker will not preside the House. Deputy Speaker or the Speaker will also not vote in the resolution that is brought about for their removal. but they have the right to stand up and speak and present their point of view before the voting happens. Now let's do question for the day. Yesterday's question was Network Readiness Index was released by, and the answer is World Economic Forum. It was released back in 2016 and after that it has not been released. Today's question is this. Consider the following statements. Total factor productivity is a measure of economic efficiency. Statement 2. Total factor productivity growth depends on labor and capital. It's a little tricky question. Think about it before answering. With this, we have come to the end of the discussion for today. Hope you have learned something in the last 40 minutes with me.